Coach, I have a question for you.
Go for it.
Let me take you back to the summer of 2014. I am a
Okay.
incoming freshman at Archbishop Stepinac High School in White Plains, New York. I am trying to figure out
Yes.
my way and make my way on the freshman football team. And I see a beige line coach in a straw hat with a beard. Do you think I saw Coach Andy Martinez, or do you think I saw my dad?
I was actually going to bring this up. I think we talked about this before. I think you had some PTSD back then because you saw a gentleman with melanin,
Yep.
tan gentleman out there with a beard. I had a beard and I had my straw hat, which was dubbed Bobby Bowden
Yep.
by a coach. So I still call it Bobby. I have it tucked away somewhere. I retired Bobby. Um, I think you were scared. I think you saw Coach Prince. You didn't see me, and I think at that point, I don't know how'd you feel. Let's start by that. Let's
when
start by
when
that.
when I
How'd you
saw
feel?
you, when I saw you, I was like, wait, he's supposed to be in Detroit right now. Why is he here right now?
There you go. There you go. Yes, I didn't realize that. We talked about it later. Um, but the resemblance, I will be honest with you, is uncanny at times. I do have pictures uh, with Deuce and James, and after we won in 2017, the infamous top 10 play.
Yep.
You guys can check it out on Sports Center, probably somewhere on your Google, go into your Google machine, type in Trillium Stepanak. You'll see the play, and I can tell a great story like that. I'm yelling and screaming my head off because we roll out. I forget who messes up the protection, and I'm like, and then I just see the ball because the ball is coming right in front of me, and it was quiet. The only time I've been around where I've heard a touchdown, somebody scored, and everybody was like,
That just happened.
there was,
Yeah.
that just happened. So yes, that's been great time. So
Get
What
the
do you,
picture of get the picture of Fluffy on the Native American technical difficulties.
Oh my
There
yeah.
you go. There you go. We're back.
Please
We're
please
back.
stand by.
Yes, please stand by. Please stand by. All right.
All right. And with that, welcome to the 4-3-4 defense. My name is Deuce Prince. I'm a Charlottesville, Virginia native, lifelong UVA football fan, and former college offensive lineman. But we are not talking about college tonight because we have a very, very special guest joining myself, my brothers James and John, our high school coach, a legend at White Plains High School in White Plains, New York, a Sacred Heart graduate and long, long time offensive line coach in the New York metropolitan area, Coach Andy Martinez. Coach, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's always good to see y'all, get back up with y'all. It feels good. I've been following your 434 podcast. I'm proud of everything you three guys have done. I've seen you grow up from little pipsqueaks to amazing men. And I just want to say congratulations, James. You're jumping. Have fun. It's a little different. It's a little different now, but it's always a pleasure to be here. Um, so let's get started.
Coach, when you first met the three of us, we were all very different people and football players compared to when we graduated, let alone to where we are now. Tell me about the quarterback, the soccer goalie, and the wide receiver.
Uh, it, Three different personalities to say the least, and I don't know how mom did it. and sis did it, and be in that house with you three. You had, Senator Prince sometimes, diplomat. We always thought he would be, a senator. You had James. James was a little fiery. He got a little edge to him. Me and him have had some sideline, issues, and discussions, very heated discussions.
Healthy debate, yeah.
A healthy debate. That's the best way I can put it. And then John was on the other side. Me and John really didn't have. We had connection. We always talked, but he was the dark side. He was that other side, or as I like to put it, he was on the light side, because I always think of the offensive line as the dark side, because we are the others. And I embrace that. I talk about that, and being the empire, and evil. I'm a Yankee fan, so you talk about the evil empire, and we always talk about that. And, that's something I try to relate to my guys. We're the guys that everybody doesn't want to know or doesn't care about until we do something wrong. And then everybody wants to know, like John can miss, squeezing down the gap, and no one would know that he didn't do his job, but doggone it, y'all miss protection. I'll throw a whistle, and I don't know how many times the whistle has been thrown, and I've broken many, especially during COVID when we had to do the electric whistles. I think I broke 3 in like 3 weeks. And, so that's it. I would say you guys are very different personalities, but all come from great people, and my relationship with mom, dad, tremendous. They gave me the opportunity to work with and be a part of your lives, and even to this day, it's amazing to see what you guys have done.
Absolutely. And I mean, for all three of us and all four of us, I'll throw my sister in there too. I mean, you met us at a period of transition in our lives. Our parents had just split up. We moved to New York to be closer to my mom's parents. My dad was now coaching in Detroit. I was entering high school. All of us.
I thought he was he at Rutgers?
He was at Rutgers. He was in Rutgers for the year before. So when I was shadowing Steph,
got you.
And then he went to Detroit, and all of us were growing up and figuring everything out like that. And for as different of people that we are, the one thing I always want to thank you for is you had like the perfect temperament and way to reach all of us in that special way, whether it was throwing the whistle or whether it was just with a look of, come on, Deuce, like, come on.
I would always say, and one thing I've done over the years, and the way our relationship grows over the years, and Deuce and James can definitely talk about this, and even John too a little bit. The way I talk to you and coach you up your junior year or your sophomore year is a lot different than by your senior year. By the senior year, it's less yelling and screaming, more like, come on, and here's life, and let's talk about life, because football's going to end soon, and let's discuss where we go for pizza, or like, what are you doing after school, or what are you talking, hanging out like that. So you can talk to guys like that over time. A lot of what you get out of me your freshman or your sophomore, your freshman year, usually I don't talk to the freshmen much, or I'm very, you guys can talk about this.
It was just a grunt in the hallways on the second
floor. Yeah, it's a
corner.
Grunt.
Just like trying to make us flinch or something like that.
It's scare the tar and feather into you. Sophomore year, okay, kind of, you're in the weight room. Is this guy really crazy? Junior year, yeah, he's really crazy, and I can't get away from this guy. To senior year, like, at the end of the day, he's a cool guy. He may be crazy, but he's trying to make you better.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about being a coach's kid is you can identify that and pick that up in its own way. You might not know it at the time. You might think, man, he's really being hard on me. But at the end of the day, like, he's on me because he cares. And
Right.
that was one of the things that I'm sure impacted John just as much, even on the other side of the ball, is like you were, for us, one of the biggest culture drivers in that program.
Right. Right.
And it helped set the tone for everything that we did to our viewers during the time myself, James, and John played at Archbishop Stepinac in New York. We went on a run that program had never seen before, really. It
Never.
was a collection of coaches and players and people that were just extremely special, including Coach Martinez, and it was lightning in a bottle. And it was just such a special time. And Coach Martinez 100% was one of the biggest culture drivers on that entire program. And like, Coach, I know you're going to hate bragging on yourself, but like an amazing offensive line coach from a technique standpoint, a fundamental standpoint, like unbelievable.
And that is a lot of learning, and never being. And James, I watch James now, doing his training. It's always watching and learning and, trying to find, all right, what's the best way to reach and teach. And, I always said coaching was teaching. And one thing you got to learn is the way I coached maybe James. And I found this out recently, especially with, someone like James or, DJ Williams right now, who's at BC. The way I coach, though, like someone like James and maybe, DJ was using basketball terms. I would say, we would, in our screen game, flip your hips, go, sprint. And I'm like, I told DJ, just go run pick and roll. Go run a pick and roll. And he understood that. So, the big thing with teaching as a coach is trying to find ways to reach your players, students. I use students because I'm still a PE teacher now. But you talk about how, to reach your students and using words and things that they can understand. And so it's always develops relationships, and having those relationships with your players so that they can be successful. And that's something that, just comes over time and not being so aloof. And a lot of people want to be aloof, and you hear a players coach and you hear that someone that's mean and nasty and dog cussing you, and then you have a players coach. You could be a players coach and still be very demanding. And y'all would know better than anybody else. I might have been the most demandingest person in on the staff. And even now they're like, Coach, why are you so hard? Because I expect the best, and I know what it takes to get there. And it's learning from all the college coaches and learning from watching NFL tape. Just try to piece it together. One thing I always say, at the end of the day, we could talk about, and we had this conversation before, I don't know if it's going to make it, the run of my D1, guys who played in D1, it's almost like a who's who, and I'm lucky, I've got a guy who actually, yeah, y'all two played with on the same offensive line, the 2017, 2018 offensive line. Ajani, Cornelius, you look at those guys, we took them to the next level, and I started them on the process. But, one of the things I always say is, like, look at somebody, and I'll bring up from that 2016 team, like Tommy Nevin. Tommy Nevin. Like, you take some, and I don't want to, Lamar.
Yeah.
Or Shotty, doggone Shotty Rabati, who's, they're doing great, but, and we could talk about that. How about it? And this is going to go off the rails. I know it is, because we're going to start telling stories and getting all over the place. We could talk about the steak dinner because Shotty Rabati's dad opened his mouth, and we go out and say, he came out, and I'm going to tell him this, and this is, we're just going to go off the rails, people, and I don't really care.
Yeah, no, we're good.
It's the coach and former players. He said, I think we won our first playoff game, and the dad goes, Shotty Rabati's dad goes, Coach, if you win, we're going to win it. I'm like, yeah, like, better steak dinner. He's like, we looked at each other, and what happened? Before y'all left, we sat at Flames in Elmford and got a steak dinner.
Yeah.
We said that. And, just in general, you look at, a lot of guys, And it's funny, and I talk about this now, I mean, going into year 16, I started in 2010, and it's kind of interesting watching everybody grow up, and I always say the offensive line is always like, no offense to defensive line, okay, um, offensive line is like a strange group of guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of their own like little world and little brotherhood and out there, and it's kind of interesting to see, like, I'll see pictures with last year, with it was James,
Yep.
Mooch,
Yep.
and Ajani at the NFL draft. Just seeing that picture, it was like, wow.
Yeah.
Or watching you two, that day when John graduated, y'all two giving John the diploma.
Yeah.
Those were good. Or nowadays, I'm lucky to have two of my former players, Mike Tartaglia and Amari Brody, now coaching JV. We were talking about this before. You see, Deuce was coached by Coach Gwynn, who played for me in 2011. So this group of the five guys and have taken on the life of its own. Where I was talking to Jalen Williamson Thomas.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there with Jalen, and he sends me a message recently, like, of all his group to like sitting at the table. It was the other bodies, and Ethan,
yes,
Bangari, and they were just sitting there like eating, having lunch. Like, it was like, I'm like, wow, like you don't understand. Like, I don't know if we could see this, and it's hard, but like they're all sitting there and having so those things of being a coach, you always impact people. And I always say, and I said it, I was impacted by my coaches, Mark Sandonato at White Plains, who's now helping out at Valhalla. You pay it forward. Mm-hmm. So and I see what James is doing, paying it forward now to the next generation. That's one thing I always tell people.
Now,
Deuce, let me just
go for it, James. Go for it.
Like, so last year it was the way that Ajani and Mooch and the three of us were able to meet up. So it's the week of the NFL Combine, and obviously, Ajani was coming off his great season at Oregon, and he was coming back out to Indianapolis. I had the real pleasure of last year going out to see a bunch of his games because of Oregon playing the Big Ten, going to see him play against Purdue, going to see him play in the Big Ten championship, and then going to see him at the Combine. And then it just so happened that Ball State, because of all the scouts and coaches being in the Indianapolis area, that Monday we're having their pro day. And so, I was already planning to meet up with Johnny, and his mom was there, and, his whole crew was there to support him. And then I texted Mooch. I'm like, hey, like, I just checked you. You're in town? He's like, yeah, like, I'm in Indy. So, we were, after the whole day of the offensive lineman stuff, we were able to go get dinner. And it was the first time that we had all been together basically since COVID, when we had some of the workouts.
Who paid?
I think we split it up.
Oh, come on!
I think I offered. Or hold on. Hold on. I think we may have to. I'll have to ask them tonight. But I think I definitely offered to pay because I was the only one technically with a job at that point.
That's true.
I was the only one with the job.
Check the NIL money.
Right. So I was like, hey, like, I think I offered. I can't clarify yet. But anyways, it was just great because we spent. We basically we closed the restaurant down, just the three of us sitting there, just going back. And it all comes back to the special bond that we had, not only at Stepanak, but being offensive linemen at Stepanak.
Mm-hmm.
And, the names that you've already mentioned, and there's so many other people that have just, whether it was our teammates or other coaches and people just around the building that have just impacted our lives to make us who we are today. I mean, we mentioned it earlier, like, it's definitely not the same person who I was when I first walked into those doors on the Marin Academy.
No, you were a soccer goalie.
Well, let me clarify. I was a basketball. I played basketball. I was a basketball player who happened to play soccer.
Yeah.
Show the jersey. Show the jersey.
I was aspiring D1 basketball player. I was going to be the next Charles Barkley, undersized big man. But neither here nor there.
Yeah, and then
You know,
you were the
neither here
starting
nor there.
JV goalie.
Then I was able to do a lot of growing up, did a lot of embracing the process, and then sophomore and junior year was a real big step up for me in terms of everything in my life. So, and I do, and all joking aside, I do owe that to you and the entire
Yeah,
Step and Act community, because I wouldn't be where I am without you guys. And that goes with Deuce, that goes with, Ryan Kohowitz, that goes with Shadi, Lamar, Mooch, Ajani, all these people who we were able to just be impacted by playing the game of football and being an offensive lineman. It's a very special bond. And, we can go for hours and hours. And my God, I know Deuce will have some other questions and prompts to set us up with, but I mean, it is something to look back on and be proud of the things that we were able to accomplish more than just being on the field. And the fact that
yeah.
we mentioned earlier, like the men that we have all thankfully become, and by God's grace and glory, like the people we're able to be who we are now at turning 21, 24, 25, all these different ages is crazy to think about. But just that has all been impacted during those 4 years that we were in high school.
What's impacted me the most is seeing facial hair on the three of you. Let me tell you that right now.
Well, to be fair, Deuce had the facial hair, it just wasn't permitted.
Yeah,
Yes, for
It was
exactly.
just
reference,
never permitted. Deuce just had it was a daily battle between him and the single razor blade that he had
Yeah,
at Stepanak.
to our
yes.
viewers for reference, Archbishop Stepinac is an all-boys Catholic high school, and so there is no facial hair permitted during the winter. It's a tie and a shirt and everything like that, and there's an expected dress code. And when you have this, it's not a winning battle.
No. And especially when I'm the one telling you you better shave.
Yes.
Because at
So
that time I was the dean. I was in the hallway. I was making sure that everybody was on point, and that was one of the things. In looking back on it, you say as a teacher you get to affect a lot of people. As a dean, you get to affect more people, and not just you guys, but in talking, being around, still coaching a step and act. You see a lot of guys coming back and a lot of people coming back. Like Ian Hamilton. I'm just dropping some names. And them really, really having that reflection on it as they gotten older, what we were trying to do for them,
Yeah.
and
yeah,
especially as a minority, an older minority male to younger minority males, um, there was a certain way, and Big Six was, another person that really emulated this, in the building. Um, Coach Wilson did, I call him Big Six. I still call him Big Six.
yeah.
You know, you know, um, he really, we really tried to set the tone of how we wanted you to act because we knew what was coming ahead of you and we knew
Hmm.
what was demanded of you and how you should carry yourselves if you wanted to be a successful man.
Absolutely. I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
our school is definitely one where you're in White Plains, New York. It's in Westchester. It's a bit more of an affluent area, but the student body, you've guys coming from all over the place. You've got guys coming from Harlem, the South Bronx, all the way up north in Poughkeepsie. Like you've got people coming from all over the place, and so it was incredible. And this is something all three of us can speak to, regardless of position. It was an incredible melting pot there at Archbishop Stepinac. It was incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great school. It gives opportunities to people, and like you say, we always talk about 4 for 40.
Hmm.
The relationships, and James touched on it. John can talk to, with his group, and Deuce, you can talk about it with the guys in your class.
Yeah.
You stay in contact with them. The relationships you build, guys helping each other out, and those things, and that's what it's all about. It's the brotherhood, the fam. We always talk about it, and Coach Od did a great job talking about this,
Yeah.
the family, and that, once you're family for life. And, with, and you guys can speak on this more with, OD helping you out, whether it's, changing schools, whether it's, whatever, you could always reach out to him trying to find a job, any contacts. And,
Yeah.
and that's, that's what you want. And that's what you want to coach, and I happen to worked for one of the best coaches around that really, yes, he has all these wins. Yes, he has all these state titles and he's done a, tremendous job and will go down, should be in the Hall of Fame, New York State Hall of Fame. Um, but it's, the aspect of, watching you grow up and always being there and being someone you can count on, and that's, pretty much what, we always try to do and emulate.
Coach, one thing that I want your perspective on now that we have some distance from it. So myself and James, being so close in age to each other, being right next to each other, my favorite color was red, James's favorite color, or my favorite color is blue, his was red. I went to the left, he went to the right on some things. My senior year, James's junior, you had us both. And I can tell you right now, and I can speak for James on this too, probably. Our relationship got so tight when we played together under you. Did you see that process going on over the course of the season?
Well, so I'm going to bring up a classic moment, and I don't know what happened at home. I'm gonna preface it by that. Okay, and it kind of started at that moment, and I brothers, I'm a brother. I have a young brother. I have two boys. They're brothers, and they always fight and they always argue. It kind of went from whatever happened at home. It was brought to the field that day.
Mm-hmm.
And someone was upset about somebody about something, and it was taken out. But I'll say this, there was a switch that went on that, and it only happens with brothers where y'all took it on the field, did Oklahoma,
Yep.
right? Not gonna say who won. Not gonna say who lost.
I'll be man enough to admit it. Deuce won. He kicked my butt.
Right.
I ended up getting a concussion from that because Deuce decided to dogpile on me as soon as I was on the ground. But
right.
Continue the story though. Continue.
But but one thing I'm gonna say is, and then Deuce was chirping at me, and like he was like the older brother. Like sometimes something happened, got to put it down. He was talking a little smack. But what I saw was at that moment, once you were down, I saw Deuce go like, it was like, doom. It was like, oh shit. Excuse my language, like, oh shit. What I just did.
No, you're exactly right.
And that was kind of, one of the deals with having a brother so close in age and playing literally like Deuce was the center. You were the
Coho was our marriage counselor.
Yeah. Coho was in the middle. It's a marriage counselor, and there was a lot going on. But
like,
you were at tackle, Mooch was at the other tackle, you had Ajani and Shotty kind of at that other guard spot, but you saw, it was Mooch at right tackle, James, you were at left, Coho was at left guard. Deuce was the center. Shotty and Ajani were the right guard, and Mooch was the right tackle. Mm-hmm. But you saw, that moment, like, oh, I just heard my brother, like, oh, wow.
I think it was a useful exercise because I was like, well, I don't feel like a winner at all. I feel like crap.
Right. And I saw that in your face, but to say that, looking at that dynamic, it was at times, and I'll say this, and I knew that Deuce was Deuce, right? And I understood this because, you always compared, to each other, and being in so close in age, and sometimes growing up, for me, I was always known as Andy's son, right? So now my dad's known as Andy's dad, from what I've done, in my football career. But
yeah,
how did I manage Deuce and James? I kept Deuce, James, and I tried to keep, I tried to not, tell, well, you're Deuce's brother, so you should be doing X, Y, and Z. It's like two different people. And always remembering you're two different people. And then John, coming over, and John can talk about this, and John being called James, and I'm like, you're John. I know you're John.
I'll,
You know,
I will
and
say there was a point during my senior season. I can't remember what week it was, but I remember being called down, and it was like the middle of the day, and you asked me if I wanted to play offensive line.
yeah,
You tried to
probably
get me to play offensive line in the middle of the season,
yeah.
because
and
we
you
needed.
were
We were down. We were probably hurt. I forget who was hurt, and we needed. Hey, listen, come on.
and
I need
I
just learn
weighed
some
like
plays.
220. I was like 220,
It
225.
didn't matter. It
Listen,
didn't matter.
I just needed at that
Move your
point we were
feet.
probably down. And for anybody that knows, and we'll talk about this. I usually like to carry, at least seven offensive linemen, seven healthy offensive linemen, seven, guys that I could trust. And at that point, we were probably down, like
Well,
five
I
or
remember
six.
Mark got a concussion. Charles got a concussion.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
someone else got hurt. I
Oh,
can't remember.
you know what it was? It was probably after the it was after the St. Anthony's game.
Mhm.
Yes, yes,
It was after St. Anthony's game because you brought up Mark had a concussion. I
yeah,
remember the play. He kind of snapped it and got hit, a couple of plays before.
yeah,
So, we were down and
yeah.
I needed some all hands on deck.
Yeah.
But at that point, I just needed somebody to learn the plays in case our heck broke loose. But
Right.
that
Uh,
but having and I don't know and there was and I think watching Deuce and James grow together and play together. And I don't know what, when we went inside or what happened off the field, it probably brought you together more. But
Yeah.
there was nothing like that moment of watching, like there were pictures of you taking a knee together, and praying before games and that opportunity to travel that road because 2017 was kind of special.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
You look at and 2017 was a lot different than 2018.
Mhm.
James, like that whole thing was, that 2018 was a whole nother world,
Yeah.
and with winning the first game, losing the next four, and then coming back, everybody looking at each other saying this isn't happening. We turn the switch and go on a run of 8 and destroy people left and right. But watching, you two guys in that 2017 year, kind of grow and develop and have opportunity to play together.
Yeah.
Not too many people have that opportunity to play with their brother, at all.
I'll say that, I mentioned it. I obviously freshman sophomore year was a lot of growing up for me, a lot of maturity that I needed to have. The first 2 years of my time at Stepanak, I got very sensitive about the idea that I was Little Deuce or I was Young Deuce or Little Prince or whatever people names would give me, right?
Mhm.
And for the longest time, I mean, the Deuce and John, we all know, and our sister knows we are each other's best friends.
Mhm.
But when you get to the point of obviously in high school and you're trying to figure out who you are, I had struggles with it at times of figuring out who I am versus who Deuce is versus who John is, right? But then when I got to my junior year, something for me kind of just clicked where instead of being like antagonistic towards it, I really wanted to embrace it because I realized that this was probably the last time Deuce and I would ever do anything together ever.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
obviously Deuce's senior year, my junior year, and obviously we got to drive together to school every day. Before that, like I think only one of us Deuce maybe had his learner's permit or whatever, couldn't
Yeah.
take me, whatever it was. So like that year, every day we would go to school together, and it was something that you're in the car and you develop that relationship, and obviously having those expectations for the both of us of being leaders on the team, having a team where at that point was just coming off of a really tough loss for Deuce's junior year,
Yeah.
which was previously 2 seasons that I think you guys went what like 24-1, something like that. Like
Yeah.
there was a lot
Yeah.
of expectations on 2017 of what this team was going to be, right? And Deuce and I were able to kind of whatever it was with football, with school, it kind of brought our relationship extremely close. And that was something that I was forever grateful for, which then my senior year, John's freshman year, I wanted to try to take an approach of because we were so separated in grade, I really wanted John to be his own person and be John Prince. and
Mhm.
not be referred to Deuce and James brother, although it just happened. Like it just happens naturally
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of how great of a job Deuce did at Stepinac with everything in terms of leading this, not only with sports, but just leading the student body and all the teachers and everybody being affected by how great Deuce was doing everything. We were able to, at the end of the season, when John was done with his freshman season, he was able to come up for 2 weeks and practice with the varsity.
Mhm.
And that experience of me being the older brother and John and I going to practice together, we were already driving to school every day together, but staying late together for practice, practicing with each other and talking to each other, that was an extremely special time, which then full circle moment,
You got to do
was
it
able to
again.
bring us to
Yeah.
Indiana, was one of the main drivers of me going to Indiana State to be with John. So
So can I ask
yeah,
you a question?
yeah.
That moment, right, compared to the Indiana State moment, was there a difference? What was
I,
the difference?
Mm.
How was
I
it?
think
How was the dynamics different at Stepinac than at Indiana State?
so. I think the biggest difference was the fact that I was transferring into Indiana State as a graduate student. John was going into his sophomore year. Um, the season at Indiana State was a lot of turbulence, a lot of ups and downs, and it's something that and John was fully playing defensive line at this point. And
Mhm.
John was on the scout team, and so we would practice and block each other. And they made him, they moved him to defensive tackle. No, he had to play one tech or through techs at times, and we would go up against each other every day,
Every single day.
every day. And so that was an interesting dynamic because obviously we lived together, we were doing everything, obviously besides classes or things like that, but like practice and football was John and I's
Yeah,
time together.
Mhm.
And, you know, because of all three of our relationships are so dynamic with each other, like that was a very interesting time. I'm very grateful for it, but definitely wasn't easy just with how hard the season was and
yeah,
not going the way we wanted both of us for it to go. At Stepinac, we were already on the precipice of winning, although we had the struggles at the beginning of the season and we were able to turn it around. But by the time John was on practicing with varsity and being on the sideline for the St. Francis game, the state championship, it was more of let's really enjoy the moment. Like let's be here and
right,
celebrate it. Indiana State, I in the moment I wasn't able to fully appreciate how special that is. Um, until now, and obviously now that haven't played, have been done 2 years now, I now get to look back on it, and despite all the hardships, I know that I'm a better person through everything. I know, John really
right,
was grateful for it, but like it was just two very different experiences for sure.
Mhm.
I don't know,
right.
John, if you want to
Yeah.
add more to that, what do you think?
Yeah. Freshman year, that was the first time since I was like 7 that I had played football. So like it was a lot of relearning, trying to figure things out. Like, okay, like I was a wide receiver, was I outside linebacker? Like what was I doing? Like I didn't really know what it was or
Mhm.
what I was really doing. Like I remember before the St. Francis game, I had I had the hoodie on underneath my pads. Like I knew I wasn't gonna play. It was one of the coldest games I think I've ever been a part of. And James comes up to me and he goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Why are you wearing a hoodie?" I'm like, "It's freezing outside. It's windy. I'm not gonna be
You
running around. Like, I'm just gonna be
you
standing
you
out there."
never played at the rooftop then at night.
So
And he goes, "You got to take that off." And I'm
This is
like,
this is like
"What are you
10 minutes
doing?"
before the game. Like this
Yeah,
is like
we're
we're in
about
the
to we're
locker
about to
room.
go out.
I'm like, my last high school game, and I'm like, John, take the dang hoodie off. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he gives me like the Vaseline to put on my arms to block the wind. I was freezing the entire game. But that moment was special because he was trying to help me and
Mhm.
kind of learn what was going on, and we were, like you said, really taking it in. But then we obviously had our 4 years apart, where
Mhm.
he was off in college at Howard in Delaware, and then we had that time apart, and then living together again, having, being able to hang out all the time, like. I saw that as a lot more fun, even with all of the on-field problems. And there were a lot of days, especially in fall camp, when we would come back to the house and we would not talk. I would go straight to my room. He would go to his room or talk to my roommates. And like if he beat me, I'd be mad and didn't want to talk to anyone. And we had a lot of those days. But when we were just hanging out in our living room, in our kitchen, or doing different things, or before games and after games, like that is some of the most fun that I ever had. And I think it's because we had that time apart and coming back together.
Mm,
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed everything about our time together, but it was different because we were more peers and on the same level, I think, at that point
Right.
yeah.
than him teaching me the ropes and everything.
Right. Yeah, you know, and that's, you know, the you could see how the relationship in 2017 was passed down, and then, you know, brother to brother to brother, you know,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
know,
Well, and it's
Deuce,
funny in that.
Deuce, what was your perspective from senior year for you?
Well, I'll say this. So, like, it went in the search of all three of us trying to become our own people and then coming back together. We were all searching for what our identity was, and ultimately realized we were the most proud of it being the Prince brothers or the
Yeah.
Prince siblings.
yeah,
That it was a fist of just one. And senior year playing with James, obviously we got that one Oklahoma drill out of our system, and like at least out of my system.
That was
what
good.
was it over? What was it
I
over?
I don't
It's the
remember.
typical
I think
brother shit
I
because
think
I don't know.
I think it from what I maybe remember, I think somebody in the locker room, you know, had like gassing up like, oh, like Deuce is better than James, whatever, right? And then something maybe has been said, and then when we get on the field, people kept on instigating it, and then like coaches are like, hey, we got Oklahoma Joe who's stepping up, and then so it's like Deuce and James are up, and they're like, everybody's like, yeah, we want to see that. I'm like, okay, I guess we're doing this.
It was
Like,
something stupid. I was
yeah,
mad, and then like from that, and when that happened, after that, a switch was flipped, and over that rest of the camp, and then once week one hit, we were inseparable basically,
Yeah,
yep.
and it became the most fun I've ever had playing football because me and James communicated so well, and we just happened to have a really special group that communicated well all together. And we took our lumps, especially our younger guys like Shoddy, Mooch, James, Ajani. They took their lumps, and then they came back and they grew from it. Like I remember we had one of the most miserable football games I've ever remembered in my life. Cardinal Hayes at Stepanak. We had a chance to avenge the loss where they had 12 men on the field on the last play in the city
yes.
championship the last year, and we took a shellacking. Couldn't protect the quarterback, couldn't complete a pass, couldn't
Oh yeah,
stop a
yeah,
nosebleed.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We couldn't do anything right. And instead of shrinking from that moment, we ended up growing from that moment and went on a absolute tear into the offensive line winning the MVP of the state title. Like,
Yep, yep. And here's a great. So here's how history repeats itself. So we beat Cardinal Hayes 14-12 this year.
mhm,
You know what play we won it on? Why hide? I put it in.
that's
I put it
awesome.
in. The exact same play. We put it in. We ran on the goal line, going in. Uh, Joe Morency, who didn't play it, runs it. We throw wide hide, we score, we win the game. So on the same play that we ran back in 2016, on that 12 men, fast forward almost 10 years later,
That's
9 years
amazing.
later, that we use that play to beat them. But yeah, it's always the bond of brothers, and we can go on this, and we've kind of said this over and over again, the growth and watching, that was an amazing, we could talk about that game, coming back 2017, you know, our offense coordinator just had his son.
Yep.
So we didn't have our play caller. We had Coach Barger calling the plays. Coach Trigler just had his son like the day before, and I'm telling him, like move some guys around, and we pull off the big upset. I still have that picture somewhere. Um, of us warming up that day with Yankee Stadium in the background. It's an amazing picture. To then watching a grown man, not man, he was a junior, Mooch crying when we
Yep.
made the stop and we had to go out there, bawling his eyes out,
Oh yeah.
bawling his eyes out, to make that play, and guys like Sean Harris and Jamal Dallas and Trill, that's when Trill became Trill.
Yeah.
Shout out to Trill London, WWE prospect. Follow him, evolve.
Yeah.
Crazy how that has become full circle and everything. But yeah,
but you look at certain things and watching them grow, and then then we go to 2018 and we start having our struggles at the beginning of the year. We lose a game, that Chaminade game we shouldn't have lost, and the rally, and then it started, of all things, it started that Hayes, get us back on track. We played Hayes, that was Sunday night.
Yep.
At the rooftop.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, we just started rolling, again, and it talks to the brotherhood and the gentlemen in that room and learning by doing, and just, the bond that you guys had, that, you committed to each other, and those things, and getting back to something, I want to talk about, and you look at, all the guys, we're talking about the offensive line room. One of the big things I always talk about is from a standpoint of being what I call college ready.
Mm-hmm.
Can you take your guys or their senior year and what I say plug and play? Can they step on the field? Maybe, and we all know circumstances at that level are totally different. But as your freshman year, can you contribute? Are you that far behind? Is what they're learning, is that, and some coaches, in some schemes, you look at it, are not what I call college compatible at times, or certain things. So, you look at that's my always big thing, watching guys, can I get you college ready?
Yeah.
Whether you go, to the Citadel and run, in the flex bone, or you go run a pro style, to an air raid type deal, to, another spread version, that James did, one thing you could say is, and I'll talk about James, fit in, plug and play his freshman year.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to laying the foundation, and that's something, after a while, you want to talk about, and you start getting into and starting to think about is those things, and watching your guys, being able to succeed at the next level, just that foundation you put. And that was kind of always my thing, like getting you guys ready for college and ready, even in the way we set up camp, the way we set up practice, those things, like trying to mimic what you're going to see, or our schemes or stuff like that, so that, I tell, if I can block a Coach DeMarco defense, I'm good.
Yeah.
And John can talk about, a defensive scheme that, is very aggressive, but, think about it. You go to Indiana State and you're like, some freshmen their heads are spinning. You're like, this is actually easy.
Yeah.
This is easier than what I did in high school.
Well, and one thing that I always appreciated was, and it's probably unique because I played center. You put a lot of responsibility on me as a center, and I learned to really love the game of football because of the trust that you had, whether it was at the line of scrimmage, and me and James were just, you were like, kind of keep me in the loop on what you're going to call things in certain situations.
Well, and that's a certain thing of understanding, where you are as a coach. Like, this is, are you a transactional coach or transformational coach? Are you just worried about wins, or just transaction? Very, very simplistic. And Coach LaCharles Bentley talks about this. There's the who, the what, or the this, the levels. And I actually have it. I took a picture of it. And I'm more of why, at a point, and letting you, all right, this is what I want, and And offensive line, I understand. I had my own ways when I played the Sacred Heart. I had my own ways. You start to have these different communications and kind of calls. These are the calls, but then you guys kind of start doing your own thing. And I'm like, hey, as long as everybody's on the same page,
Yep.
and you know what I'm talking about, and this is, I call it that, but when you guys get out there, hey, if you got a better call, you got a name that you came up with
Let's
sitting there,
let's not let's not call this, because we ran no huddle, so let's not call it the same thing every single time. So if it's a
right,
West Coast school that starts with L, we'll use that for left, or
right,
East Coast school with R.
yeah, but that's understanding that, sometimes you have to trust your older guys to make sure everybody's on the same page. And that's the trust, that you develop as a coach, no matter what level, you trust in your players to make you look good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something, I'll say, James, as you're doing your offensive line training, that's the thing that I want you to also impart on those guys, is working on that trust. Because, and I always tell my guys this now, like you kind of know everybody's nuances playing offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like, when you're in there, the guard, he has his quirks,
Yeah.
and it's how, everybody's quirks, and you kind of know how people are. So,
Yeah.
I always say, having that trust, because, the old adage, I had a great, college offensive line coach. I actually had a couple, Coach Lacey and Coach Gibbons. Coach Gibb always talked about the fist, the five fingers. If you took five fingers and slapped them across your face, nothing really happens. If you took those five fingers, balled it up as one, put it upside somebody's head, something's going to happen. So, that was kind of one of the things I always talked about, the fist. I went through like all these iterations. Offense lines always have this, 5 strong, whatever. I had the chain gang, I had the lunchbox crew, and it was funny. And we're going to talk about this when we're here. Actually, I want to thank Deuce up front for coming up with the five guys mentality, because we were sitting, I forget, either in the locker room or in the trainer's room, and we're just sitting there talking, and I'm sitting
Yeah.
there, I'm like, Coach, how about this guy? How about that guy? I said, Deuce, all I need is five guys. That's it.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how
We
many
need
guys,
five.
I just need five. Like I can have 7 guys, in a rotation, but I just need 5 out there.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was it. And it took off, and the 5, this has become, bigger than life in the step back community, and in the football world. You become offensive lineman, you guys go around, I still do this with Ajani, or you guys, know it. It's not a symbol, but it's that brotherhood that you guys have developed over time.
Absolutely.
So,
I
I thank you for my hashtag.
There we go. Me and John had very similar football careers, and so John's experience his freshman year was a lot similar to my experience sophomore year, going to the state championship with the varsity team. It was a great experience, and it was interesting for me being the oldest, because these were the upperclassmen. They weren't necessarily one of my siblings' friends, and so I was kind of figuring my way out. That was when Dwayne did not practice that week, the week of the state
Yeah.
championship, and you
Yeah.
had me blocking Malcolm Kuntz, NFL edge rusher Malcolm Kuntz.
Listen,
Was that
listen.
a test of like, can this kid
No,
handle it?
It was just, hey, we just need somebody out there.
we
Like,
we need a scout team.
we
I
just
need
need
a
a look.
scout. I need a scout team. I need a look. So get out there
I
and
just need a look.
go. Hold your
Yeah.
own. Pray to God. Hold your own. Pray to
We
God.
we had a similar experience my JV year, sophomore year. We had to go up, and I was playing left tackle, but I had to go up against Isaiah Powell, Gene Brown, and Matt Matrakos, and maybe one other person. But each
Yeah.
play, like, I just take this ball is snapped, and I'm like, well, I'm either on the ground or the person's behind me. Like, I don't know what to
Yeah.
like. I don't know what just
That's
happened.
usually,
Like,
and I know John's on the other end, having to, as a JV player, like we'll call the JV defense over against
Oh,
the varsity O,
yeah.
and it's like, hold on, here we go, boys. It's
Going,
gonna,
yeah, my sophomore year going against Ajani was not very fun.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was that was
yeah.
not very fun at all.
But in that, yeah, and saying that is at times, we needed other guys to, yeah, and you think it's not like a college roster where you got 100 and some odd guys,
Right.
and even our, and we have 50 or 60 guys, but still, to give a look, like,
Yeah.
especially, for Deuce and James's, when we're going against that no huddle, two books at the same time, we need two huddles. We
Yeah.
can't fill out that other huddle. All right, just varsity scout team in one huddle and the JV scout team in the other. Or at the end of the season, the call ups, they find a way. And sometimes there were a few where you looked, and you said this could be the next. I'm always look, and to be honest with you, I'm always looking. All right, who can be that next person, and
Yeah.
who can hold their own.
Right.
But I'm sorry you had to block, a perennial NFL edge rusher, bending the corner like he does now.
I was like,
Shout out to Malcolm Coons.
I need to go back. I need to go inside. I need this tackle thing. That's for James.
But you think about it, and I talk about this, and I'm lucky, we have multiple players, being in the NFL at times, but watching those guys, like in a one-on-one session, or watching them work, and seeing each other work and taking kind of pieces off of each other. One thing was, I say the mooch chop, and it's funny, how something like the mooch chop, and he had the chop down, and you can watch his senior film. People, DJ Williams tried to emulate the mooch chop. The wax on, wax off. And you start to pick up other, people's moves and stuff like that. So, you kind of develop this, thing. But yeah, it's a rite of passage. I ain't gonna lie. It's a rite of passage. And even to this day, we still, the call ups have to, they get a little wake up call.
Well, and I remember that call up week we were playing in Buffalo. If the New York Catholic High School Championships alternate between the New York City Metro and the Buffalo Metro,
Right.
and I'm like, all these older dudes are gonna think I'm a wimp if I'm wearing sleeves, so I gotta go out there with no sleeves. There was no hoodie on the offensive line,
No,
and so
and there was a difference at the time, when Deuce went to that in Buffalo. The game would, and this is when I think about this from your sophomore year to your senior year,
right,
and then James's senior year. It went from a neutral, quote unquote, neutral site. The first game was played at Mitchell Field to the one we went to Grand Island, and then I think it was at Fordham 2026, and then 2027 or 2017 we played at Canisius. We
yes,
played at Canisius home to turn around in 2018 to play at home. If and I know Deuce was around for the Fordham crowd in 2014.
Oh, I was there.
And
Yeah, we were all there. I remember we all
you're
together
there.
just going. We had
Yeah.
it's one of those games where you look back and like you can't believe the amount of talent that was on that field and being able to, as a young eighth grader, I think I was, or a seventh grader, being able to,
Mr. Mamdani, bring the championship back to Fordham.
Well, it was
Something like
at
that.
it was at Fordham this year. It was at Fordham
Yeah,
because
just had to.
Iona and Farrell.
Yeah,
But forget what was on the field. It was like looking at the stands, and it was, all the stands were packed at Fordham, from wall to wall.
oh yeah,
So only be done in 2018 when we looked up, and I know John, just stand on the sidelines, you kind of look back and
Yeah.
the entire it's packed.
yeah.
And the opportunity to play in front of, that many people in those crowds, is something that you don't get to do.
Yeah.
Very few people, get to play in front of thousands, and thousands of people, on a daily basis.
Well, it was incredible because of how much we had those the 2018 season, how much we struggled in the beginning, we were actually, I think, the 5th seed in the playoffs. So we only had, normally in the Stepanak heyday, you have 2 to 3 home games in the playoffs to get people excited and be a part that. We just had the first round against Christ the King, and then we were on the road at Iona, and then on the road up in at St. Anthony's up in Mitchell Field. So it's one of those experiences when you're able to come back for the state championship and it's at your home turf. You had the team from Buffalo driving down, and the fact that it was our best game that we had put on all season.
Hmm.
It wasn't like we had a drop off or we were struggling to pick up. Like
Man,
we hit
as soon that
all
punt return, the punt
oh
block was game over. As soon as the
punt
punt
block.
block happened, it was
I
game over.
mean, we had I think it was like 11 to 12 sacks. We had screenplay after screenplay touchdown. We had big yards, kick, punt, like all 3 phases of the games. Nothing seemed like it could go wrong. So, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better last game of my high
Yeah,
school career to finish off like that. And like I said, to have John on the sidelines there with me was incredible.
Well,
yeah.
and I want to take you to 2017. It's pouring rain in Buffalo, Coach.
Oh my
John is
goodness.
in the stands with
John's in
with
there.
our entire
Whole
family
family.
basically
Yes,
Yep.
freezing
yes.
up there, and yours truly absolutely airmails the first snap.
Well, yeah, it kind of happens, nerves and those things, and you kind of start getting, a little antsy, and you know, the Italian dinner the night before really got to you, and you're
I
ready to
guess so.
go. And but
It's
it was one of those things, and it was you guys were you were nervous.
it was the calm, but it was funny though because like one of your greatest coaching moments was the first thing I did was I looked over to the sidelines and I was like,
Oh,
my dad's there, Coach Andy Marr's there. What are they gonna say? And both of you just kind of looked and you just said, calm down. And it was one
Yeah,
of the greatest teaching moments ever because at that point we started to lock in. And then James, you can speak on this too. It was the calmest I've ever seen a team run into the locker room down a score.
yeah. I mean, we didn't like we were super nervous, and the first half was just very sloppy. Did not play very well, and we go in, and I remember like the little like outhouse we had for a locker room, and I think we all kind of looked at each other and were like, "Is this how we really want to like go out like this?" Like we drove across the state up to Buffalo, and we're just gonna lose. What was like 13-7 or whatever it was. Like,
right.
is this how we're gonna let this season end? And I mean, that was the start for me. What I remember most was obvious. I mean, obviously everybody talks about the great play that Trill had at the later end of the game, but that was the start of our good friend Malik Grant. His
Right.
ability to come up in that
Yes.
game as someone who did not get a lot of touches that season, playing behind a really good running back in Jamal Dallas, like he was able to step up in a big way, and we ran like the same 3 plays over and over. We just had Coho pull or it was Mooch pulling, and it was like so like every play I'm either I'm just locking the B gap and I'm stepping out, or I'm just
Yeah.
down blocking with him, and it was like the same 2 plays, and we just kept rolling over and over again until finally we were able to put him in submission. Um, and then of course the cherry on top was just Trill hitting that play.
Well, well,
I
we,
literally
we,
remember
we
like we're all
knew
just standing there, like they kind of had one guy rush or whatever, like maybe 2 or 3 guys rush, like me and Coho are like double teaming a dude, and then I kind of like stand up because I haven't seen the ball be released, and then all of a sudden in the corner of my eye, like it goes up, and it felt like the ball was in the air for like a
it,
minute,
it felt like it
and
was forever. I
and
was I was watching. I was like,
yeah, and nobody, and you're right, it was dead silent. Like the other crowd, I mean, Canisius's crowd had been taken out of the game. Our crowd was trying to figure out what, and we're just all looking,
well,
and
you remember
everybody but
they kicked. Go
yeah,
ahead, go
like
ahead. No, before the game.
everybody on the field had stopped playing. And
Yeah,
then
Yes.
Trill is the only one who he's falling back, and then he catches it. And then me, Deuce, and Coho kind of just look at each other like, did he just catch that? And then all of a sudden, like, you see me on the video, I'm like losing my mind, like
no.
running up over to him. I'm like, no way that just happened like that. Yeah.
because you remember their students came over the hill and charged the hill like in a whole crowd. They
Yeah.
took the
Yes.
hill and they came through the parking lot and they were all hyped up, and they had the crowd going, and that you know it was time, and that says something, you guys, the will to want to be successful and want to be to win and want to, you know, and we always talk about this. How do you want to be remembered? And remember going out as champions. And I always talk about this. There can only be one. It's almost like Highlander. In the high school world, there's always one team that goes out as winners.
Yeah.
Everybody else, when they put their pads away, you go home with an L.
Yeah.
And that the only one that's left standing is the champion.
Hmm.
So, in the college world, with bowl games and things, at the FTS, area, you know, most can go out as, play their last game as a winner, but, at the high school level, usually it's the champ.
Yeah.
So, that's something that, the fortitude and I would say football is a great tool for life. And maybe you guys can speak on this more, but I can speak on it as a 46-year-old. You look at things, from that standpoint of how football has changed. Football has um, developed, certain things of being time management, that fortitude, getting up. You try to tell high schoolers, that 6 a.m. workout, when it's 6 a.m. and you got
Yep.
to be fully ready. We've all been there.
Hmm.
Those winter workouts at 6 a.m. When the whistle blows and you're doing mat drills.
And I grimace, and I was in South Carolina. I don't know how y'all did it north of DC, north of New York, like y'all did.
Yeah,
Cold,
no,
cold.
it was something. It's hard, and I know I did it, at Sacred Heart back in the late '90s and early 2000s. But when it was time to go, but having to get up, having to set your alarm, having to, manage your time and those things, you never know how that will help out and how it helps out you in the business world, or creating your own business, or doing those things where now you're in this whole new world where you have the ability to just take those lessons that you've learned from the people before you and the people you had in your lives. That's the thing that like coming out, sitting there in the locker room looking at each other like, all right, let's go. What's left. The same thing. You can sit in the boardroom where you're sitting there and you're like, all right, we got to get this done. Okay, what do we got to do? Or create a new product or a new idea, or create a company. Okay, this is easy. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
you know
So
so
I got something for you. So
go.
taking a break from memory lane, we see
Sure.
like obviously college recruiting is a lot on Twitter or X or whatever, but I feel like more every single day I start seeing like high school commitment posts or like graphics with high schoolers. What does that look like now as a high school coach, getting someone to come to Stepanak?
It's very similar to like the college world, and trying to get students to eighth graders and even seventh graders, and sixth graders wanting to be a part of something special and being part of something that, is an opportunity. So really trying to, you know, let them know, what's going on, and let them know, you come to Stepanak, you're going to be a better person than you were before.
Hmm.
We love to talk about, 2018, all the championships, and we have the litany of those, but it's how the way you come in and the way you leave. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing. I talk about 4 for 40. You know where 4 for 40 came? I think we took that from Yale. They
Hmm.
talk about 4 for
Yeah.
40, like your next 4 years set up for your next 40. Well, same thing, coming into step back. So a lot of the things that happen, it's a trickle down theory, and it's a trickle down kind of deal. Same things that they're, from a recruiting, not a recruiting, but getting your name out there, getting the opportunity out there, telling them what why you should come to Stepanak, and the opportunities to you know be a part of this great brotherhood, and just always on Twitter, always posting something. We retweet when somebody's doing good, or we repost, and those things. So it's changed, but just like any other sport, it's changed. And you have to grow and adapt, to it. And it's as a Catholic institution where we can reach out and touch many people. We're not just a public school where usually in a public school area you have the people who live in your district. Our brand is out there. So really, in that end, just letting students know, what we're about and how coming to Stepanak will help you achieve all your goals.
Yeah.
Not some, I talk about it, we talk about this all the time, 24, 25, it's over. What are you going to do? You can only play, round ball so much or football so much. What's the next goal, or what's the next life? How many opportunities? And we talked about this before, the brotherhood, the family, the opportunities that you have, and it's funny as I get older, and being a White Plains guy, I'll talk about this. If those don't know, I played at the public school in White Plains, and Stepback was one of our rivals. We played on every Thanksgiving. So coming back now, I see guys I played against. They're coming around or being around, so we always talk, and you see the brotherhood they have and the giving back to the program that they have. So we try to sell that.
Yeah.
To students why they should come to Stepanak.
I think it was so critical for us, and I think it's critical for any young guy growing up to be in contact with and have daily interactions with other male role models, other men in their lives. And so, Stepanak doesn't have a monopoly on being an all boys school,
No.
but there were so many points of interaction with people who wanted to celebrate your successes, wanted to see that process through, wanted to be there from the starting point to the end point and be there to acknowledge that and really acknowledge it. And I think that is something that Stepnack does really, really well. And I think it made us all better men because
Right.
we weren't searching for something that was non-existent. All of
Right.
us had a Coach Shed or you or Coach OD or any number of different people interact with them over time. I thought that was so important.
Well, and I think, when you look at high schoolers and high school coaching, and it goes back to kind of something, I learned as teaching. They don't care what until they know you care.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to listen to you, or they're not going to put their effort in until they know that you care about them. They don't care what you know. And that's something as a coach, and the hardest thing, like I said before, we started about this is find the right words to say and find the right, sound bites. This is, and maybe you guys, James, can talk about this a little more, and John, and even Deuce, the way your coaches talk to you now, or the way you talk to, your clientele, the people you train at, the short attention span where I have to find sound bites,
Yeah.
and but because attention spans, but for them to get your attention, they got to know that you care, and not just, care about you as wins and losses, and I could say at some point, oh, coach, you've won, you've done all this, and you've, you're at the point where you could say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even if you're not there yet, always be a transformational coach, transform these people, because then at that point there's going to come a point where the wins will come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the wins.
I mean,
Go ahead.
you mentioned we had people before Stepanak was what it's known now. The people that you were coaching before Stepanak was they would come back. So
Right.
I mean, that groundwork that you're mentioning was already laid out before the wins came, and they
Right.
can only come until after until all of that's been laid out. And I would say, like, in terms of, the kids I train, like, it ranges from college guys to like middle schoolers and fifth and fourth graders. And I see a lot of times, obviously, you mentioned earlier, though, you have to figure out who your audience is, who the kid you're talking to is, but especially with the younger kids I talk to, everything like you're mentioning has to be condensed into something that's easily, regurgitated fast. And like you focus on just that rep, just that set, just that play, just those one different exercises where I'm breaking it down for them and then break piece by piece, like we're layering everything on. And so, especially for the younger guys, like they have to take a lot of information in. And with younger kids, like middle schoolers, like if there's like a group of them and they're a bunch of buddies, they're like
Their attention
always
span is not
they're
big.
always like they're always bumping each other in line, or they
Wait,
start
wait,
drifting.
wait. It's like
They
it's like camp. It's like camp again. You
yeah
guys
they
all did
yeah
camp. You,
they
you
start
guys all
drift.
did. You guys all
Yeah.
remember camp.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
those little kids at camp, and Coach D sends them to the outfield.
Yeah. Like they start drifting off into space, and I'm like, hey, like like reset, like we got. And so I always tell them, like I have something like where I tell them like, hey, lock in. And then I'm like, hey, when we're done, like for 10 seconds or like a minute, like then you can like take a second to breathe or whatever, but like, hey, when we're in these moments, we all have to be paying attention. And
Mhm.
Yeah,
so that's something I found is like with younger kids, you have to have that patience and you have to be able to break it down for them at a level that they understand. Because if you're just trying to, the techniques and the drills that we're doing is stuff that I did in college or we did in high school or are guys that do in the NFL. But if you're trying to explain it to them like they're in the NFL or they're in college or they're in high school, it's going one ear out the other.
yep,
So I have to break it down. You have to break it down to them in a way that they are able to regurgitate and understand. So yeah,
yeah.
it's very funny now, especially where I'm just like, why are you guys like so distracted? Like just focus for a second. Like you guys wanted to be here. Like let me help you. And they're just like, sorry, coach. Like there was
They're
a
they're
ball rolling
they're
by, or like,
they're worried about Roblox
yeah,
or
yeah,
Fortnite or something else, or and that is, and it starts with your ability to understand. And I talk as a teacher, your ability to understand content.
Mhm.
And whether you're a teacher, you really talk about content. And it's understanding the content and really digesting the content, and then like you say, regurgitating it in a way that makes sense. I tell my guys, if you saw the way, and we've all had, Deuce and James have been in install meetings with me,
Yeah.
and the freaking install is like 3 paragraphs long. I've gotten to a point where I said I needed to condense it now.
Mhm.
So when we talk, it's very simple. You want to talk about the double team, we talk about, all right, here's the rule. If we got, GT to the right, all right, you're the right tackle on this thing. You're gonna combo up, and then we're gonna do all this, resist front, that front. Well, I broke it down now. My right tackle is B gap to backside backer.
Mhm.
My right guard's A gap to backside backer. But if there's no one in A gap, you're gonna combo. So it's A gap combo to backside. Like we've truncated it so much because like you say, you gotta help the kids out, or you want to play fast. When you talk about this, as we watch the 434 podcast, you look at some of those, teams who play fast, you have to play fast. And how do you play fast? And I always talk about this. One of my things playing fast is knowing,
Mhm.
and knowing, and how do you know? Well, number one, you got to feel confident, but number two, you got to study. But there's certain things, you can't make it. Coaches do a great job of making things complex.
Yeah.
The simple complex, we got to make it back to simple again, and old school like B gap to inside backer and stuff like that, so that guys can play fast, because we know defenses aren't going to line up, or offenses, nowadays. You look at all these spread systems, and I do a great job, all season studying different things, and looking at different ways, and how other people do it, through the Google machine, and trying to search
Yeah.
for playbooks and stuff like that. You know, sometimes it's a lot to digest, and at the college game, especially, as a freshman, James, and you guys can talk about it as a freshman, the college playbook is very intense.
Yeah.
And as you get on, you try to do that, but it's the quicker you understand it, the quicker you can get ready, and the quicker you can execute, the
Yeah.
faster you get on the field, and but that goes into content, and can you break it down, and can your coach break it down for you, because we've all had coaches maybe who are lacking, some things, and that could put it out there, or that was one of my thing, like I say, can I get you guys to play fast, and and it was kind of a green light moment in my career when your father said, like good job.
Yeah.
And because at that point your dad was with the Lions, and
Michigan and all that. Yeah.
Michigan and all that, and he saw that, those things, so like, it's like, all right, I'm kind of like on the
Like,
same
there we
path.
go.
Well, it was,
Yeah,
I mean, Deuce and tell this and John, like, it was always an effort until I got to Howard, like that streak got broken. But he always told us that, whoever our coach is, like, that's who we're listening to. Like,
Yeah.
that's the person that we're giving our energy to. That's where we're focused to. Like, yeah, I would look at Dad in the stands, but he's like, look at Coach.
listen,
Look at OD, look at Venice, look
I
at
was,
Barty, look at those guys, because those are the people that they're putting the product on the field, and they know what's going on. So it's like
and,
that's that was from what
and,
we had known since day one, was to be a part of that.
Yeah.
yeah, no, and that was, even I had a couple of conversations with him, and he was like, you got any ideas? He's like, you're doing no, no, like I was trying to,
Yeah, I
like,
wanted no part of it.
he wanted
No part of it. And
zero
the
part.
best would be, and he's told this story countless times to us, is where he's sitting in the stands, and I think it was Deuce's JV game or Deuce's junior year game, one of those things, and it's a team from out of from Long Island or something like that, and the funniest is when he has like the parents from other teams or other people like
Yep.
lecturing him about what Stepanek needs to be doing
Oh my
or what the other
God.
teams need to be doing, and it's like no, you just don't understand. Like, we just need to throw the ball more. We just need to give the ball to my son. Like, do whatever. And it's like that's just like, yeah, like, okay.
Oh
He just
yeah.
nods his head, he's like, all
Oh
right.
yeah, there's been, I think, after we won I think it was 2017 or 2018. Yeah, he's like, there was, and at that time, me and your dad kind of, developed this relationship. He's like, yeah, I had to walk away.
Yeah.
He's like,
Oh yeah.
there were, I didn't, there were times I had to walk. I'm like, all right,
Well, Deuce, I don't know. Sorry, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
you're good. You're good.
I was just gonna ask, like, I was just gonna switch gears for a second, but obviously this has been really cool to talk about memory lane and everything that we've done, and you've been such a big part of this. But I'm excited to talk about what's next for you guys, for the five guys, and for Stepanek next. So, you know, talk to us about how the offseason's been. Obviously, this is the first year. Our great close confidant AJ McGee, the legend himself, John was the guy who backed him since day one, before Deuce
Young
and I even knew
McGee.
about any of this. John's
wow.
JV coach,
That's
who
my
he won
guy.
he
Yeah.
won JV championships with. So this is his guy. It's all of our, and we're super excited the fact that he's the one that Coach OD kind of entrusted to lead this. How has that been with the year under your guys' belt, and this new program that you guys are trying to do with Stephen?
Well, we're and one thing with Coach McGee, it's building that hard nosed heart, what we had back then, that workman like mentality, and the standard, and it
Mhm.
sounds, I'm gonna steal from, one of the coaches that kind of I like to focus on, Mike Tomlin. The standard's the standard. And
Yeah.
that's something, we've the thing we talk about is the standard, and living up to the standard, and upholding the standard. So that's something we always talk about in meetings, in the weight room, on the field, is always upholding the standard, and that S. So that's something we're big on. The weight room, we're iron sharpens iron,
Hmm.
and we're getting in there, getting after it. Our schedule hopefully is going to be released soon, but it's the SEC of New York State football, as I call it. The Catholic
Yeah.
League from top to bottom, week in and week out, is always
Battle.
difficult. It's always a battle. So, from that standpoint, we're guns loaded, ready to go, ready to rock and roll, and hopefully, get back to, where we should be, and I always say, there's nothing like November football. And, that's something that, you try to entrust in, and let those guys know, and from a personal standpoint, it's been a while since, I've wore my championship red.
Yeah.
That's something I kind of a little thing. I always talk about. I never wear red. I'm like Tiger Woods, except though Tiger Woods always wore it on Sundays. I never wear red until it's championship Sunday. Any red I wear, but that's always the goal to be one of the last two teams standing, being in that championship, and get an opportunity to hoist that trophy, because there's nothing like it. You guys been around it before, and it's
Hmm.
hard work, dedication. Guys are working at it. you know, I'm looking forward to it. I always look forward to every season, because it's its own person. It's its own like deal. No,
Yeah.
no seasons are ever the same. Each season has a life of its own, and we're really focusing on I always say doing the alumni proud.
Yeah.
And having the ability to talk about it, or see it, watch it. It's one of those things. You could be anywhere with the S, and they know who you talk about. You
Yeah.
meet people on the street, or anywhere. I remember in 20. I could be at Giant Stadium or somewhere else, and I'm wearing the Stepinac gear. Like Stepinac High School in house, and you just want to make them proud. And that's the big thing, and up front, always trying to find those five guys that want to be a part of this thing, and develop that mentality, that workman-like mentality, and just want to work hard, and
Yeah.
just live up to that standard. That standard. We always talk about the standard, and I always harp on the standard, and the standard I said is the Deuce Princes, the James Princes, Dwayne Scotts. That's the standard. Those guys, and I point, and it's lucky they're always back. Like those guys. That's who I hold you to. Like you want to say you want to be the best. Well, that's the standard that you got to live up to every day. You want to be that, and that's how we go from 2026. Ready to rock and roll. Hopefully we can get y'all back
Yes, sir.
and watch a
Definitely.
game. And, I know, some of y'all live further than most. And, Indiana is beautiful at this time, but always New York is home, gentlemen. Valhalla, baby.
Well,
There we go.
it's you mentioned the schedule. I'll touch on this real quick. It's awesome, and I think it really started with John's senior year. The fact that you guys, beyond the Catholic League and how hard that is week in and week out, going across the country and playing these other teams of significant prominence, and despite whatever those games results are, it's super surreal to see that as an alumni now, where I see Stepanak,
Yeah,
playing against the number one team in Maryland, or
Yeah.
the top
yeah,
top five team in New Jersey, or the best
yeah.
team in New York City, or the best team in Pennsylvania. Like seeing those
Right.
games, and whether it's at a college venue, an NFL, like seeing those events and seeing that you guys get to be a part of it now and be a part of the national conversation of some of the best teams in the country. That's awesome to see as an alumni,
Right.
and I know as the players like Deuce and I would have killed for a challenge like that and would have been so excited to see something like that. Just playing Zavarian Brothers, or playing, Central Dolphin, or I forget the team Deuce that you guys played, your junior year, but like
Oh gosh.
playing those teams we were so excited to show, how legit New York
Yeah.
high school football was.
Yeah.
So
And it's an opportunity, having the chance to go like to Baylor, down
Hmm.
in Tennessee, that was something else, and that opportunity, going to All Saints in Texas,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That trip was incredible.
right.
They had the number one offensive lineman in Texas. Their left
Yeah,
tackle.
you
He
know,
went to
and
that. I can't remember his name, but I think like for guys like me or Jalen Johnson, Jordan who got hurt in that game, or Wayne, like, and I think especially for that whole defense, we ended up losing that game, but I think that was a big confidence boost
yeah,
for all of us. And the highlight of the trip, without a doubt, God rest his soul, but Coach Farmer being able to go to the Star and how
yes,
excited he was.
Oh my
I
God.
yeah.
mean, it was the purest form of joy I think I've ever seen in somebody. And that
Cowboy fan
was,
on the Star.
I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah, I wish I could have been there, but I just started a new job, so I had to wait
Right.
until game day. Me walking, literally, I walked on the field
Yep.
midway through. So, like I'm supposed to leave. My flight got canceled. They put me on another flight. So I get down there to Texas. I'm taking my Uber. I walk on with my bags. I'm literally like coming right out of the Uber, walking down the hill, coaching the second half, like just all over the place. But then, having the chance, to see the pictures of Coach Farmer on the Star, I had a chance to go to Daily Plaza, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The opportunity to, see that, have a chance to go to like Vanderbilt and go sit and watch a
Yeah.
Vanderbilt game,
Yeah.
or watch the SMU game, which we went,
Yeah.
the day later. Those things
Coach
are
Coach Gene was watching the game at home, and I can't remember who the assistant was, but he called him. And during halftime, I was on the phone with him at halftime, and
yeah.
we were talking about things. And then speaking of Jalen Peaches, we left him. I don't know if anyone else remembers this, but like he didn't get on the flight back.
There were a bunch of you. No. So what happened was there was a bunch of you guys that missed that didn't get up and had to come back with us. Okay. So I was on the second. I was on the second. There were two flights going out. Okay. There was the first flight that left at like 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And then there was the next flight that left like later on in the day. So it was like a handful of guys that didn't get the wake up call. Okay.
Well,
I don't know.
I remember getting a text from Jalen. He was
Hmm.
like, "Where's everybody at?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
So
oh God.
so
They thought they were bigger than the S.
no, somebody didn't wake them up, so we had to put them on the other flight with us on the way back. But yes, that those were times, the opportunity, to showcase New York football,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and something that, I know, if I told you, we would go play a Jersey school and beat a Jersey school, you might call me like insane,
Right.
coach.
Yeah.
Like there's no way you're gonna do that. And
Yeah.
we did it. We beat a great DePaul Catholic school.
Yeah.
In Rutgers, and then I think we played them again the next year and beat them at
Hmm.
home. But and then we're kind of had some struggles there. We played Donovan Catholic. That was a whole nother.
We won that game. We won that
Yes,
game.
we won. We did win that game. We did win
We
that
won
game.
that game 1-0.
Yes, we did. So
They had a
no,
player deemed ineligible.
yes, but even the opportunity of going to play those things and something like Donovan Catholic is funny. When we played Donovan Catholic, I saw my high school teammate. His son now is going to plays at Donovan Catholic now. His younger son's going there, but they were in Tom's River. But the opportunity you tell me we're going to play Jersey schools, and those things, and we what the league has done with the Catholic League over there, the opportunity of the Battle of the Bridges, we play
Yeah.
every year. So the growth of step back football is tremendous, but the higher the bar you set, the more you got to reach, and it starts in the off season with the off season workouts, and then all the whole off season calendar of the learning the system and getting ready to go, because those trips, as great as they are, they kind of dwindle, your preseason time, because now
Hmm.
you have to get ready to go to play against these schools, who may have 1 or 2 weeks ahead of you. So, the time frame of summer camp is a little
Mhm.
more imperative that, we come in prepared and you guys come in prepared, or our team comes in prepared, with all the summer workouts of the lifting and the conditioning and, the mental aspect, of learning the playbook with our mini camps and stuff like that, is very heightened because, you want to look at, where 2026 is coming, you know, that first week, you got to be ready to go to hit the ground running,
Yeah.
because you're ready to go, and that's the big thing, when you look at what we're doing in the off season and how we're structuring it and how Coach McGee and the rest of the staff we're trying to put it together and get the kids ready because that's the end game.
Yeah.
Is being ready for week one. Whoever it is on our schedule, is we got to be ready. We
Yeah.
can't like sleepwalk through it. We gotta hit the ground running, and so it's a lot of preparation from a coach's standpoint, making sure that we're prepared, schedule wise, our yearly calendar, our preseason calendar, stuff like that. So you know it's year in and year out. It never you never get off the treadmill. You get a little break, but then you're right back to the grind. And
Yeah.
you know, because at the end of the day, you want to see your kids successful and you want them to experience, that feeling you have of being the last man standing.
Yeah. I mean, to go full circle on that, that part especially, growing up the son of a college and pro football coach or the child, you have a very abnormal lifestyle, and for us a very abnormal relationship with football because there's a stake in it. Are we going to have to change
Right.
schools? Is our livelihood as a family depending on this? And to go back to the earlier point, the way that you and my dad handled that whole situation, being the adults in the room, that state championship in 2017 was like the most normal football thing I had ever experienced
Right.
because I had a chance to play in front of my mom and my dad and my grandparents and my siblings and play with my brother, and like you know I had a chance to experience that as a football family, with my dad being a fan of the team and being a fan of what was going on, and it permanently will always be etched in my mind how happy I was on that day, and I it always makes me smile thinking of that game. And so, the way that got handled, I think was the best way possible because it gave us the most normal thing in football.
Yeah. And that's something you want, and it's and speaking of that and what you talked about when and one thing we always talk about family, and that bond and how you build that bond. Well, I remember when you talked about your relationship with football prior to coming to Stepanak and those things and having to catch the punt and
Oh yeah,
you guys have had that different relationship with football than most people. There are very few that have walked in your shoes and can understand, the livelihood of certain things. But saying that, you know, you look at the opportunity that Stepanek has given you and those things and how life is, the road.
yeah,
You never know, coming back home to being closer to your grandparents, watching your grandparents at every game. And I used to see them all the time. Your mom, brought them to
yeah.
every game, and they're always there. And, watching your grandfather get that award. Was it John's
Mine,
John's
yeah,
year?
graduation.
mine,
Yep.
yeah.
John's graduation, and you see that, that's amazing. But, you look at for other people and you want them to be successful and them to, reach the top and watch them grow and watch them, the hard work pays off. You know,
Hmm.
you, you know, you, you could say it, and I watched, you listen to someone like Herm Edwards, talk about the amount of time that goes into football
Hmm.
comparatively. James can talk about this and Deuce, as a pitcher, don't forget about that.
Yeah.
You
Oh
know,
man.
yeah, listen, you guys were multi-sport athletes, before choosing the right sport. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you look at the amount of time football does put in, to the amount of games you have to play. It's as a coach, you want to see your kids successful, and that's something that always wants to, is in the back of my mind. How successful can you be? How successful can you get somebody? Um, that's what makes it all worth it, and then we can have these conversations when, you're 25, 26, sitting there, just forget, talking about memory lane, but, talking about, just things that, have gone on in your life, and how to progress. And, I always come back to it, like, you wake up and, you're the old guy looking around, and, there's, you watch all your former players, are now fathers and,
Mhm.
having children and getting married. Congratulations, James, by the way,
Woo-woo.
once again. Hopefully you guys got your speeches ready, because I want them recorded. I want
Well,
them
I
recorded.
don't know. We might have I think we were pending on it, but I told Aaron, I was like, she's like, "Oh, is there anybody like besides like friends or family like that just that you wanted to bring?" I was like, "Well, there's a couple people I had in mind, but we had decided on a fall wedding, to very unpopular, with the social circles that we are in, but you
Whoa,
know
why fall?
exactly. Here we
He
go.
loves this woman.
But yeah, I love the woman. We all, and she's never wrong. She's never been wrong about anything in her life. So fall is it's perfect. It's the greatest choice that she's ever made in her life. But I
Just
was
kidding,
saying,
Aaron, if you're watching this,
if
we love
there's
you.
if there happens to be a bye week that on September 19th, like where to find us. We're gonna be if you're in Maryland. We need you on the dance floor hitting the electric slide in front of Moose and Ajani.
Let me. I'm gonna put it in my calendar, and I'll make my way down to Maryland, and
Hell yeah.
I'm just gonna sit there and cry a little bit, with my wife,
Yeah.
because it's at a point where, you look at, the relationships, and it always comes back to relationships and how you affect people, and that's the big thing. You talk about it, and I never forget it. You can X and O's your life away, and
Mhm.
we could get on the board. And I could talk X's and O's, and I always say defensive guys always win because they get the pen last. You know, talk to any defensive guy, and if you're not in a war room and for those watching, we get on the board. Offensive guy always goes first. He puts the formation on,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Defense, then the defense coordinator gets the pen. He puts the front up. And the offensive guy gets the pen. He runs the play. And the defensive guy does the
Like
coverage and the
I can
stunt.
counter
But at
that.
the end,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the defensive guy always, and you guys don't, and the thing about it is, as a coach, is, like the scripts,
Yeah.
and we start talking about scripts, and offense guy for some reason always does the script first. Don't we always get
Yep.
our script done first, and then we got to hand the defensive guy, especially, we're starting to do that, and the defense guy always dials up the right blitz for the right look, and then go change it a little bit. Oh, it is
That's
it's
not
hilarious.
realistic. That's not what
It's
we're
not
that's not what we're
realistic.
looking
That's
for.
Yes, exactly. But
What play are we on? What play are you on?
Yeah.
yes, that's right. But
Coach DeMarco
I,
always had a six-man blitz every time we had only five protecting. Who
oh my goodness,
knows?
right? And
Big dog week. It never failed.
it's listen,
But
it always comes out. But in saying that, we can X and O everybody to death, but it's always come down to Jimmy and Joe's, and
mhm.
are your players going to play for you, and are your players going to do what you ask them to do? And that's something, we talk about now is, living up to that standard, like I said before, but playing for the guy next to you, playing for your brother, playing for the, so that's really, developing that culture, of getting ready. And what we're doing is, laying that stone from the weight room, laying that stone from, everything we do in the off season, to play for that brother, so that, you're in the foxhole with them
Yeah.
when it's time to go, and we're ready to go, and they're gonna, when we call this, you're going to run it with no doubt and be successful at it. And that, from the end of the day, is what we do.
Absolutely.
And we could talk about anything we want. I'll talk about the buck sweep to the cows come home, or 5-band protection to the cows come home. I'll teach you vertical set. I'll teach
Hey,
you how to pull. I'll teach you how to down block. I'll do all of that. Yeah,
we've got off season coming up, and it's still snowy in New York, so you can't get out on the practice field yet. So we'll have to we'll definitely do this again, and we can break down some
yeah.
more ball.
No, but and it's funny, in those things I could break down the ball, but at the end of the day, we and coaches do a great job of talking about it, and giving it lip service and doing all that. But we're trying, and James, it goes back to what are we focusing on in 2026? It's those things that you guys had and living up to that standard and doing it because like you say, those great moments that we've been reminiscing about wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for the weight room workouts, wasn't for the sprints, if it wasn't for the Oklahoma drill, and those things, and those things build on each other and the teamwork and oh, you guys weren't there. One year we had the Marines come in and train,
Yeah.
with us. So those little things that you always talk about and always remember, those are the big things that build the mountain, that hopefully 2026 is, what we're doing right now and how we're going. It's and it's a work in progress. I want to see our guys, right now be successful, but as we start piecing together, we're going to start putting the puzzle together and
Mhm.
finding the right pieces where they need to go, and so we, have this successful look, in 2026, and when we take the field, we're taking the field confident and ready to go.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
Deuce, I don't know, but I would take a day with the Marines anytime over being in 4 periods of hitting the sled down in the pit after a rainy day.
yeah, I think that's fair.
I think I'd rather go with the Marines than
Yeah.
trying to
So
move a 5-man sled entrenched in 5 inches of mud and dirt, trying to push it off, shooting it off the ground, and you're
from,
just slipping inside
from what I
mud.
heard, they we've actually started a rugby team, so I think they've redone they've
Ah,
resodded downstairs down the pit, so it's not as pitty
man.
as it used to be, and all the tires and all the stuff have have
It
have
it
been
it just
replaced.
prepared me for triple option football, honestly,
Yeah,
with
no,
our
but
sled drills in our field. But we have a question that we like to ask every single one of our guests, and I don't know if it's disrespectful to ask anyone from New York what they would get at a bagel shop in Virginia,
What
but
about
okay,
what
there's
about
a
his what about
spot.
his
What's up?
I was gonna say, what about his order off of McLean Avenue
I was
at
gonna
that
say because we
one
can
time I
go.
ordered?
I'll
Okay.
There's a bagel spot in Charlottesville called Bodo's Bagels.
okay.
As someone who lives in the heart of good deli and bagel country, you're going into McLean Ave, or you're going to Roosters, or
All
you're
right,
going
so
to any place.
my
What's your
bagel,
order?
I'm a simplistic bagel order. You know, well, I'll say this. So it's going to be vegetable cream cheese. I'm going to start
Ooh.
there. I'm a big vegetable cream cheese type of guy. Bagel itself, it could be a wide range of bagels. So I'm going to start first things first. If they have a sun-dried tomato bagel, so high ridge bagels in White
Ooh.
Plains, and I don't know if they have it. I haven't had it in a while near Battle Hill where I grew up. Had a sun-dried tomato bagel and vegetable cream cheese. Money. Um, the What Bagel. So if I'm at What Bagel on Mamaroneck Avenue,
Hmm.
it's going to be either the Rainbow Bagel, still with vegetable cream cheese, or they do like a pumpernickel, like kind of like the Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah.
If any place has like kind of that Cheesecake Factory, the brown bread bagel, I'm going with
Yeah.
that. Okay, so that's my breakfast order usually. I did do once, or I'll put tuna and cream cheese on a
Ooh.
bagel. Sneaky. I'll put that out there.
Mm.
Um, Deli, if I'm at the deli, so I'm going to Dante's Deli on Central Avenue in White Plains. Okay, right by my house. I used to walk by it every day. I'm getting the Italian combo, big
Mm.
Italian combo guy, or American combo. Okay, so that's my deli order.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with. Or there used to be a place in Bronx. So let me tell you, you get chicken parm, eggplant parm on a wedge together.
Ooh.
There you go.
Shot
I like the correct verbiage you use of a wedge because
The
I've
wedge.
had heated
wedge.
debates about whether being in
Hey,
Delaware, I had heated debates of the hero or the
hero
pro or
wedge.
a hoagie or whatever. Like
It's
wedge.
wherever you grew up. It's a hero wedge grinder. Whatever they say down there. Um, but yes, and I know you guys that are not in the New York area. It's always hard. There's two things that
Not
are
easy.
hard to find: is a good bagel and a good pizza. Trust me. I lived in North
Yes.
Carolina for 3 years. So those 3 years, we found a deli from people from Carmel, but it
Mhm.
wasn't it was a great Italian deli, but it wasn't the same like a New York deli. You go in, there's plenty of New York delis, around, any corner. And pizza, one thing I don't know about, you guys definitely miss, pizza, all the time. My
Yeah.
pizza order, you know, in the Lombardo's, and we all
Yes.
know
Yeah.
Lombardo's,
Yep.
Yeah.
Buffalo chicken pizza.
Ooh.
See that
Buffalo chicken.
Lombardo's was always good because we would, especially on the Friday walkthroughs after going
Yeah.
out in Saxon Woods,
Yeah. You stop
you'd
right
hit that
there.
on the way back or on the way
Yeah.
over. So that was always a good spot to hit.
And get your buffalo chicken pizza. That's amazing. Um,
Yes.
I'm a big if funny, I haven't been to Chicago, but I do love me some Chicago deep dish or Detroit. Detroit is sneaky. It's starting to get to me.
Detroit's good.
We
Wonder. If you ever been to Wonder,
Mhm.
they have Motor City Pizza, I think it's called. They have the Supreme money, money,
But do they
money.
in at Stepanak is PC still a thing? Do people still claim PC on people's food? Because John and
I
I,
well,
and the three of us have heated debates about what is PC. Can you call it from another state? Can you call it on the phone?
I,
Can you call it from a different time zone?
so I have. Well, I'll PC. I'll put it to you this way: I don't work in the building anymore. I work. So on the side note, I used to be the dean there
Say
for
Dean of
for
Discipline
years.
Andy Marr is
Yeah.
getting
Yes.
PTSD to the lunchroom right
No,
now.
no. Well, I used to be Debo. I still tell kids I used to be Debo. I tell my players now, I'm like, half of you would be struggling now, especially if I was roaming the calf. Like I
Oh
would
my God.
roam and I'd be straight Debo and people's freaking whatever you had. And I tell this story and you guys know this Joey Cap.
Oh yeah.
So one day I'm walking. I don't know if Deuce was in the class. Joey Cap had Mr. O'Hare.
Yes, that was our
And
class.
so do you remember when I walked in and O'Hare was like, "Oh, he has a bagel," and I took his bagel and ate it right in front of him?
Yes.
I did. I would do
Yes,
that,
I
or I would
remember.
PC. I just take your fries and there's nothing. But you cannot. You have to be in arm's distance to call PC.
Thank you.
You have to be in arm's
I
distance to call PC.
I made a steak. I made a steak and pasta dinner for myself in my apartment in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is where Indiana State is.
Yes,
And I send a picture of it
they
to
can't. They can't.
and James tries to call PC on my
Can't.
food an
Can't.
hour and a half away.
No, no, you can't because he's no. You have to be in arm's distance.
It's
Arm's
The
ridiculous.
distance
one,
away.
Thank you.
well,
Arm's distance
besides
away.
PC,
Also,
the one thing
you,
that is still traumatizing to this day is making sure that anytime I have food, I
Gotta have a bev.
have to have a
I was gonna
Bev,
say no Bev.
Bev,
no
Bev. What's
Bev.
your go-to? What's your go-to, Bev?
We
7
would
7 p.m. in Brooklyn. We are coming for you as
no
the New
the
York
no
podcast. We're having a
the
real New York moment right
the
now.
the beverage
What's
of
the,
choice was always, especially when we went to like place like Roosters or whatever, getting the
Joe's.
Joe's iced tea, like the lemon tea. You get that
yep.
because it's usually people do like an Arizona or Snapple. I like the Joe's. That
Yeah.
was really good.
Yeah. Joe's
Uh,
Joe's is a good iced tea.
but
Dollar
Joe's
literally,
is a
fifty
good iced tea.
swipe, dollar fifty
it
swipe,
was
and 99-cent
it
Arizona.
it was
Yep.
almost worse to have no bev than for people to ask for your food. Because
Yeah.
then, especially if they like Mac bites, for example, like if you came from
Yeah,
if we're coming back, class is over, and you stop by Roosters and you come back to the locker
yeah,
room and you're waiting for practice to start, and you open up that can, literally like that jar, and the plastic opens, and you just hear
yeah.
a bunch of people, "Yo,
PC.
PC, yo,
PC,
you don't
you
need that.
know,
Let me get a
it's
bite.
over.
Let
It's
let me
over.
get a bite of a Mac bite." Is insane to ask
Yes.
for when it's like this big, like
Yeah, I
that.
know, but you guys got
Oh,
some friends that they need their food.
that's true.
They're hungry. They're
I
hungry.
got
No,
a
let
I
me
got a great
waterfall. Let me waterfall.
I got a
Dwayne,
crazy
shut.
story about Joe's tea. During my internship, I had to go to I had to go to a pallet company in
Right,
Moscow, Indiana, which is in the absolute middle of nowhere. It's a little Amish town.
right.
So I go into the store as I'm leaving, and for the first time since I left New York, I see Joe's tea. So I'm like, this is incredible. Like, I gotta get one on the way out. So I'm checking it out. I tell the guy, I'm like, man, like I haven't seen these in like forever. I didn't know what happened to him. He goes, "Oh, you must be from the Northeast." Like, they're like, how did you know? Like what?
Those tea.
Man, it's
It's like your bagel order. It's like the way you say it. Do you don't let me get a Beck SPK.
Yep.
What is it? Bacon, egg, and cheese, salt, pepper,
gonna
ketchup.
catch up.
It's
Oh my God.
it's
Shout out my guy Dwayne, Johnny's friend from Harlem. My guy
Oh
would
my God.
always ask for food. Always ask for food. He was
and that
never not hungry. No, he was never full. Always wanted a bite.
right
Shout out Dwayne. I love that kid.
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
but yeah, no, those are my go-to orders. And I can't eat like I used to. I had bariatric surgery, a couple of years ago, but so I still get my bagel. I got to eat it in parts. I
Yeah.
can't eat it all at once. I can't be that guy, but yeah, no, a good bagel is money. Money.
And it
Such a
is
chunk
hard.
of
It
bread.
is hard to find. I can tell you, in Florida, I was ready
Oh,
for a Virginia bagel once when I
listen,
drove up for the Virginia Tech game.
listen.
But
Bagel. Listen, get your Cuban down there. Get your Cuban.
hey,
Okay,
Cuban a little cafecito, I'm good. Like
your
that.
money. Your money.
That
You're good.
that's good in
You're
Florida.
good.
But
Yeah, you're good. But
but
yeah,
I want to make sure that we release everyone to their families at a
yes.
reasonable hour. Coach, we're gonna have to do this again. James John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is I started this podcast as my love letter to football. A lot of it comes through the University of Virginia. A lot of it comes through my times with especially the three of you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And to our viewers, if you've made it this far, it's clear that you love what we do here at the 4-3-4 defense. If I can just
Especially
ask one thing,
tonight, we put in some hours
we put in
tonight.
Yeah.
some good hours but like if you've made it this far, thank you so much. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching again from the bottom of my heart. And everyone have a great night and go Hoos.